Vanessa, Jeff, Mark, you're here, right? Dawn, thank you for joining us. Let's get started here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our session on exploring next generation education in the time of COVID-19. This is part 3 of our series, and today we're focusing on technology and remote learning. I'm Hiller Spires, Executive Director at the Friday Institute, Associate Dean in the College of Education at North Carolina State University. So for, I guess, the past 2 months now, our educational system has been launched into one of the most disruptive events in recent history. And as educators continue to figure out how to conduct school during COVID-19, we're all being called to think differently about how we serve students. And we're posing the question, how can we engage this current crisis to think futuristically about how we can meet the needs of all learners? Today, we're going to focus on how North Carolina is responding to the COVID-19 crisis in terms of supporting all students to have access to the internet as well as devices, as schools are pushed to remote learning for the remainder of this year and possibly into the fall. So we know based on some recent surveys that not all of our students have technology access, and districts are responding in different ways. For example, some are setting up hotspots for internet access, and some are having devices donated, among other responses. To date, it seems like the responses have been uneven, so still some students are not receiving the same type of instruction. So what can we do about this? And we know currently that the General Assembly has directed resources for our educational system, which is awesome. But can we get to a point that all students have access to internet and devices regardless of their zip code? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I got a great lineup of panelists to help us explore this issue. First, let me introduce Dr. Avril Goggins. She's a Research and Engagement Manager at Future Ready Schools, Alliance for Excellent Education. Hello, Avril, and I might add that Avril also used to work at the Friday Institute, so good to see you again.
I did.
Yes,
great to see everyone, all these familiar faces. It's wonderful to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, and also thank you for being with us so you can share a little bit of a national perspective. We also have Dr. Mark Samberg, who is at the Friday Institute now, and he's Director of Technology Programs. Thank you, Mark. We have Dawn Ramseur, and she is Executive Director of Digital Teaching and Learning for Hoke County Schools. Welcome, Dawn. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, there we go. Good. Vanessa Wren, Dr. Vanessa Wren. She's Director of Digital Teaching and Learning at North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And then finally, we have Jeff Sural, Director of Broadband Infrastructure at the North Carolina Department of Information Technology. Thank you all for being here. I know you're very busy, but I think this is a great panel so that we can explore a little bit more deeply in terms of what's going on right now and what possibly the future holds for us in terms of education. Each panelist is going to give introductory remarks where they're focusing on a couple of questions that I've asked them to prepare for. What challenges are you facing, as well as what lessons are you learning? And what lessons and actions related to technologies and remote learning do you think can be carried forward post-COVID-19 to help create a more transformational process for our educational system? Jeff, we're going to start with you. Where is North Carolina currently with broadband, and what can we expect post-COVID?
Well, Hiller, thanks for having me, and we really appreciate the partnership that we have with the Friday Institute. It's been incredibly successful. We just finished a survey of farmers that the Farm Bureau sponsored and helped promote, that we developed with Ray Zeiser at the Friday Institute. That survey has been vetted over, actually this started several years ago, And if you have ever done surveys or conducted surveys before, you understand how complex it can be once you dive into it. But Ray and team also developed a speed reporting tool, and we should have a report out in a matter of weeks. We think it will be a great tool to use in our education systems, not only K-12, but community colleges and universities, to determine which students have access, the quality of access, which is incredibly important, because I'll mention in a few minutes where we are as a state regarding broadband access. What we're finding is throughout the state, there are a lot of issues regarding quality and affordability. So this survey is structured in such a way to ask questions of parents and families about their experience with the service that they currently have, and then take a speed test to give us some context around what that service looks like. Sorry, I am having a few technical difficulties here.
Hey, we all have them, so we can empathize.
Yeah, this is our makeshift home office. So, but in any case, we have also been working with the Friday Institute in support of, for example, the your digital learning plan, and trying to play a part as far as the infrastructure piece to families in homes. And so when we're working in the state, we work through our technical assistance team, which works with various counties. And then we also have a rural broadband grant program where we have $15 million. The General Assembly just added $9 million to that pot to fund broadband deployment projects in Tier 1 counties. So there's a lot going on right now as far as broadband deployment is concerned. Overall, we're doing pretty well compared to the rest of the country. As you well know, we're one of the first states in the country to have all of our schools to have fiber access, and when we're talking about home access, about 95% of all of North Carolina households have access to a broadband service. Now, those numbers are a bit overstated, and that's due to the methodology by which the Federal Communications Commission collects the data from internet service providers. So we've gone out and we worked with a researcher who's done some of this work nationally at Purdue University, and we created an availability index and an adoption index, which I'll talk about in a minute. And using those indices and some other mapping tools and data analysis that we've done, we think that the number of households without access is much higher than the 95% number gives us. And so we also look at American Community Survey, and of course this year's Census Bureau census and a new mapping initiative or data collection initiative from the Federal Communications Commission should give us even more granular information on who has service and who doesn't. Obviously, our survey tool hopes to add a data point to that information. So, if that's the case, 95% have access, then we're looking at about 220,000 households across the state without broadband access. Now, if you look at the adoption rate, which is the actual subscription and use of the internet, we're looking at a much higher number. Only about 60% of all North Carolina households actually adopt to a broadband service, meaning broadband being defined as 25 megabits download speeds, 3 megabits upload speeds, meaning a family of 4 could use that service for streamlining videos, maybe one person streamlining a video, one person gaming, and some others doing email or some basic work with some basic applications. So if that's the case, then there's a huge delta between those that have access and those that don't. But that raises a red flag. Do those folks that aren't adopting, do they really have access? Do they have access to affordable quality broadband? Through some studies that have been done, not only by our office, but nationally, we found that the biggest barrier to adoption of an internet service, or subscribing to an internet service, if we want to phrase it that way, is cost. So we know we have a huge affordability problem here in the state. And if you look at any of the maps that are created regarding economic distress or low income communities, that's where you'll see our adoption map showing the biggest challenges in the state. So it should be no surprise. We're not telling anyone something they don't already know, but it is incredibly important for us so that when we're planning with communities on how to tackle the issues, the broadband issues facing their communities, we can pinpoint the real problem or issue and then attack it smartly. So data-driven solutions is how we try to work. So right now, we're still looking at improved mapping initiatives and then collecting additional data through our Rural Broadband Grant Program. And those are incredibly important because federal funding through the U.S. Department of Agriculture and through the Federal Communications Commission relies on that data. As does our Rural Broadband Grant Program. So the FCC has approximately $20 billion that it will spend over the next 2 years to connect rural communities. We want to make sure North Carolina gets its fair share. And then the USDA has spent almost $1 billion over the last year on a program they call Reconnect, and North Carolina has received 2 sizable awards. And then we're in our second round of the GREAT program, and we've had $23 million worth of requests for $15 million. So obviously there's demand out there, and we're looking forward to moving that money out to those internet service providers so that we can expand access in those rural communities. So that's where we are right now. We have all this data and information at ncbroadband.gov. Anyone can go and access the information. We also have developed a resource map for COVID-19 that allows folks to put in their address, and they can find an internet service provider in their area that's offering a free or low-cost service for COVID-19. Or a public Wi-Fi access point, so a location where they can go to if they have to drive to it. And unfortunately, it's not the best solution, but they can access the Wi-Fi hotspot from their vehicle and then download or do the work that they need to and then move on. We hope the buses help with that also. The governor just issued a press release on the bus Wi-Fi project. 280 buses will be equipped to help with those hotspot access points.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sure we're going to have some questions for you later from our audience, and I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to keep going down through our panel, and we'll circle back around to you in just a few minutes.
Okay.
So next we have Vanessa Wren. And Vanessa, what are we doing at the state level to support educators with remote learning? We know that you and your office have been very active in that area.
Yes, so we have surveyed, we work directly with districts and charter schools to promote what their needs are and provide resources and professional learning and best practices for them. So we have surveyed our field to get an understanding of what their needs are, how we can support them. We stood up a remote learning information and resources website early in March, as soon as this happens, to try to give some supports that are concrete for chief academic officers, directors of technology, parents, and students. So they have a way to connect and find out where to learn more information. Some of the challenges we've seen, though, is even though we have a district learning progress rubric that's been in place since 2015, we still realize that there have been many disparities between districts and what they have, where their vision was for digital teaching and learning, and how well that prepared them to transition into this disruptive remote learning environment. We saw that districts that were valuing and embracing ed tech, about 28 of them reported, we do not need devices. K through 12, we're good. But that leaves a huge number that had gaps in what they had available. Either they had computers for certain grade bands, or they didn't have any, and they quickly had to move to disassembling classroom labs and putting those devices in students' hands. So another piece of that we saw based off of surveying our field and getting ready to support them is there's a huge disparity between who has digital learning coaches and who doesn't. Some systems have a person per school. Some might have 0 in the district, or 1 or 2 for a district to share. And we know that that is a key piece in helping educators transition to different learning models that this one has been. We also have found that North Carolina has been in a good place with supporting digital learning competencies for teachers. We adopted the digital learning competencies for teachers and administrators in 2018, but we still see that there are many gaps in those skill levels. And so we have been very busy trying to fill those gaps and supporting those. We've leveraged video conferencing. It's been a remarkable time. We have seen tens and thousands of educators make themselves available to virtual conferences and video one-on-one coaching through NC Learns, NC Ed Talks, and various other items where we've been supporting those one-on-one and in groups. You know, we've all joked about, you know, having Zoom Fest and different connections we've been able to make, but it's actually been a very worthwhile tool that we've been able to use to support educators, whole schools, whole groups. We've seen through that parents have gotten a whole new perspective on what schooling looks like for their children. Parents have been able to sit in while teachers K through 12 have been able to do whole group, small group, and one-on-one instruction with students. And I think it's been a remarkable time because teachers are actually in the student's home. They're seeing the context of where they are and understanding what those home supports are. So another thing that we've been able to work with is trying to support each individual family with those home supports. We know, just like teachers, parents are having to act like the teacher. They're also working. Some are working from home. Some are having to leave to go to work. That leaves children watching and caring for younger siblings. And so various situations that we are learning how to support in this environment. We also know that by July 20th, the state law that just passed, July 20th of 2020, every district and charter school must have a more formal remote learning plan. And so we are quickly moving to support each district in developing those plans and making sure they have what they need to carry those out. And part of that is going to be addressing the skills gaps for students' digital literacies. You know, we always think of students as being very tech savvy. They can do many things, but we understand that academic digital skills look very different than gaming and social media. So being able to work with them to catch those skills up for them and teachers. A very positive outcome from this, though, is that we have been able to reach teachers who might have been averse to adopting technologies before. And I talked about how we've done that through a lot of the video virtual conferences and the one-on-one coaching that we've been able to have. But we have been able to truly push forward a lot of the adoption for teachers who maybe did not embrace technology or were not comfortable with it. They've been put in a situation where they've had to embrace it. They had issues that prevented them from learning new technology tools, but we're seeing a lasting benefit from being able to reach those educators and teach them the most effective and consistent ways to deliver instruction in this new dynamic. Further supports that we're able to do is truly advocate for the social and emotional well-being of our students. We know that many are feeling isolation. Our special needs populations who would come on site for physical therapy, speech therapy, different supports, using tools where those special educators can still connect with those students. And so we can't say enough how important just having video conferencing and on-demand video has been for all of us to use and to support our educators.
Thank you, Vanessa. We appreciate all of the work that you've been doing and the leadership you've been providing for the state. Mark, you've been working closely with the Department of Public Instruction in some of these endeavors and leading a lot of the work at the Friday Institute. Can you share some additional thoughts?
Sure. I think, so the Friday Institute has been working, as Jeff mentioned, as Vanessa mentioned, we've been working on technical assistance, on helping the state understand where they are with respect to remote learning, and also providing some professional learning services through remote learning for remote educators through webinars like this. So we've been learning a lot about some of the challenges that schools and students and teachers have been facing with the move to remote learning. So chief among them, so we've been learning kind of this difference between adequacy and sufficiency, right? Do you have adequate internet access that enables you to get online versus do you have sufficient internet access that enables you to work from home, right? So as Jeff mentioned, there are areas of the state where there isn't 25 megabit internet access, or cost is a barrier. You know, I have family in Burke County, and they pay from the same provider that I have, and I get gigabit internet speeds from. They pay the same amount of money every month, and they get 1 megabit internet access, which is barely enough to check your email. So we've got a lot of areas in the state like that where there is internet access that is just not sufficient for having remote learning, for doing remote learning. We're learning, you know, where schools don't provide devices to students, that there may only be one device in the household. And what does it even mean to have a device that can do remote learning, right? If you have a cell phone, is that a device that can do remote learning, right? Can students be expected to learn on a cell phone doing, you know, typing essays and watching videos and interacting with teachers on a cell phone? And the answer to that is probably no. So we've been learning about the devices that students report that they have may not be sufficient for what they need to be doing remote learning. But as schools are trying to get new devices, right, we've done this very, very quickly. And one of the things that we've seen is as schools are trying to get new devices and new broadband hotspots for students to take home, is that the supply chains are getting backed up right now. So it's very difficult for districts, for the companies, for the computer companies, to make devices quickly enough for the schools to be able to get them in time. And we're seeing ship times for devices pushed out to June and July and August. So even if schools are trying to order devices now, it may take a while to get them. But we're also seeing some of the pedagogical shifts that Vanessa has mentioned, right? So we've all moved into remote learning very quickly, right? We're going to plan a distance learning effort, and now we're going to do it tomorrow, right? So we've moved into this very, very quickly. And I think we've seen teachers embrace a lot of new tools, and I hope that a lot of those tools will continue to be used when students go back to school. We've also, I think this has made us aware of how pervasive the internet has become in our lives, right? Think about how many times during the day you go online and do something, right? You go online and check the weather. You go online and check your bank account. You go online and watch a YouTube video. Now imagine having to drive for that, right? Every time you want to do that, you have to drive 20 minutes. And that's the reality that a lot of our students are facing right now. So thinking about how we structure instruction to meet the needs of the students who have internet at home, meet the needs of the students who have to drive, and meet the needs of the students where that's not even an option to drive and they're just offline, and how we create experiences for those students who, in each of those groups, that are equitable, that are high quality. I think we've learned a lot about how we're doing that, and also shined a light on some areas where we're falling short. We're having some really, really good discussions right now around content accessibility, right? Around what it means to have content that all students are able to access and all students are able to utilize, right? The importance of assistive and adaptive devices, of captioned videos, of being able to support students who have needs that are unique relative to other students. And I think that we're rethinking time and space, right? So, you know, a lot of our high school students especially are our essential workers. And as we need essential workers now more than ever and students have those opportunities to work, that we're rethinking about opportunities about how schooling can be done in different time and in different places. So I think that I hope some of that translates over. And the reality is, I think with these remote learning plans, I keep joking that have we seen our last snow day, right? Have we gone to a point now where we did this quickly the first time, but as we get more intentional, we are able to do this quickly and for a few days if we need to. This is the third year in a row, I believe, that a part of our state has experienced a major disruption in their school year. Right, this year it's the whole state, but with hurricanes. Earlier this year it was Hyde County that was out for a month, and last year part of the East was out for a month, and the year before a different part of the East was out for a month, right? So the role of remote learning certainly is not going away. So we're learning a lot about, I think, how we do that better in the future and how we can, I'm gonna miss snow days, but how we can move to this model a little bit more quickly and a little bit more effectively.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate your comments, and we've got some questions for you as well from our chat. I want to move to Dawn. Dawn, what are you seeing at the district level? We've had some perspectives from the state level, but in terms of the district level in Hoke County, what's happening there?
Thank you. So one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in terms of this disruption is how do we provide that technology support to our families outside of the school environment? While we've altered our days to be longer from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and we're using phone and Google Chat and email, we're still seeing that some students and our parents are delayed in asking for assistance. And it can be anything from a login issue, software issue, or even hardware. And one of the things is that I feel very strongly about is students should not be meeting these barriers when they're attempting to complete assignments or schoolwork. Their energy should be focused on the content and the learning. One of the positive things I think that are going to come from this new legislation and the change in the school calendar year is that requirement for remote learning where there's an opportunity to practice, to educate our families, and to revise that process as needed. We know that access is always a concern, and when we think about engaging our student learners. However, we feel like in Hope we've been able to overcome this barrier. We're providing hotspots to our families that need them. We've provided parking lot access in all of our schools, and we're working with our county to provide more community access in areas that need it most. Another equally important challenge is coming up with ways to engage our at-risk learners, our OCS students, our students with these high needs. We are also challenged to help teachers to develop these skills and pedagogy to create stimulating and engaging lessons that give students opportunity to voice and choice as opposed to just posting an assignment. And while we feel that we connected with the vast majority of our students, it's our moral imperative that we connect with every single child. So of course, there's also a myriad of other challenges that we continue to face and work towards solutions on. And maybe things like educating our teachers about FERPA guidelines and supporting our staff who may act in a support staff role about HIPAA as it pertains to this new normal. We continue to work on engaging our much younger, lower elementary students, knowing how much more critical it is, that role of parents in the success for our students at that age. And finally, we think about challenges in terms of this idea of cybersecurity and keeping our children safe in this online environment and teaching them how to conduct themselves appropriately in this new ecosystem. And then when we think about, in the position that I'm in now and making sure that we are teaching our teachers, how do they grow in the area of digital teaching and learning, and thinking about our new teachers who are going to be coming on to teaching in the profession. What's it going to look like? Making them aware of the ways that teaching can look. It might be this face-to-face blended approach, or it may be completely online, and we have to give them the tools to succeed in both environments. So, and I know, as Vanessa talked about, we've used this virtual training and meeting capabilities in the past, but we've never used them to the degree that we're using them now. And we think about being able to leverage the strength of virtual collaboration and yielding better attendance and requiring less time because we're not having to drive to and from. I think of new ways to leverage technology in our district to positively impact student success and combat that COVID slide. I think of students participating in virtual evening academies, evening tutoring sessions where families could be involved if desired to improve that at-home support. We think of ideas of virtual remediation, acceleration, and even exploration of something new. Perhaps maybe I'm a fifth grader and I want to learn a new language that only one teacher in the district teaches. In general, I think of our students having access to community experts, which may be university partnerships and virtually connecting with student groups across the district. While there have been some school systems that were prepared to go remote, if you will, many of us weren't there yet. And this new normal, remote learning, will definitely be a part of that. And I think we have made strides. As Mark said, we had to learn very quickly, and then we'll continue to make strides on that front. Our policies, we may need to rewrite policy to be more aware how it applies to remote learning, as so that they don't become barriers. For example, attendance, one of those things we're still figuring out. And then when I think of leveraging technology in new ways, I think of parents as new learners. I think of our students as learners. I think of our teachers as learners, the community as learners. Our board members are having to learn yet another way to meet. And by doing that, they're making the meetings more broadly available to others. So as much as COVID has interrupted our lives, it's made life difficult for some and have been quite traumatic to others. I think it's going to be the impetus that brings a new norm for education. It's an opportunity for rebirth. And without sounding too cliche, an opportunity for the new education to be the phoenix that rises from the ashes. One of the lessons I think that we've learned is this notion of, if we have to, we can do it. And why that's so important is that oftentimes, if we tend to move a little slowly when we're evolving from one technology to another, particularly in education, as we're afraid of teachers who may not be able to make that change or might not be willing. And as Vanessa mentioned, one of the things that we have realized as a result of COVID is that while training and professional development are definitely paramount to success, sometimes it's necessary and perfectly okay to take off that Band-Aid, make the move, get rid of the crutches. We've seen teachers who have given a choice never would have taken the first step toward online learning, but they're now flourishing in an environment that they thought was completely overwhelming and not navigable. I think of my own hesitation of sending devices home. While we were sending them home for our high schoolers, I was very concerned about middle and elementary. Well, they're home now and we're managing. And the benefit to our students is that students can access learning beyond just the school environment. And I know that we're not going to be going back to things as they were, and we will adapt to this new way of business and access. And there's this more of a willingness to take risk with the space to learn. As we deployed new ideas and strategies, there was no expectation of perfection, knowing that things were new and that we would need an opportunity to make mistakes and figure things out. We've seen increased community involvement and expect that to continue as well. We've been able to deliver professional development differently in a way that teachers have truly appreciated. We recognize for both students and staff, it's not about seat time, it's more about that mastery and how we provide that instruction. So out of this disruption for our district is coming innovation, and I'm extremely excited about the road ahead.
Thank you, Dawn. We appreciate your work in Hoke County and your perspectives on this particular issue. We're going to move to Avril Smart Goggins now. And Avril, you'll be able to give us a little bit more of a national perspective because of your work in the Future Ready Schools Network.
Right. Again, thank you so much for having me. This has been really amazing to come back to a place where I used to be in North Carolina and hear about a lot of the progress that the state has made from the perspective of each of the panelists. A lot of what's been said has kind of been a microcosm of what's happening nationally. The Alliance for Excellent Education, where I work, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving education outcomes for students furthest from opportunity. And we kind of do that in two main ways. And so we have a policy side of the organization and we have a practice side. On the policy side, like many organizations, we've had to redirect our focus and support for those students who are furthest from opportunity and looking at their immediate needs, right? So given the onslaught of COVID and the fact that all of our schools are closed and we have to transition to remote learning, we've had to focus on what is it that students and districts and educators need right now. And so with school closing, we focused our effort to put some pressure on the FCC to leverage E-rate funds to provide low and no cost internet access for students at home. And so on March 13th, we launched this campaign in partnerships with other organizations to leverage our voice and leverage our network of educators to sign a letter to Chairman Ajit Pai advocating for the use of E-rate funds for at-home access. We launched on March 13th, and probably a week or two later, we were already up to almost 8,000 signatures and more than that now. And so we're continuing to push that issue with the FCC as a way to leverage our position nationally to ensure that those needs when it comes to out-of-school access and the homework gap are being addressed. We've also had the pleasure of partnering with Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel on the issue as well. And so we're continuing to work with her on that, on the policy side. Also on the policy side, we've focused a little bit on the CARE Act, so the Corona Aid Relief Economic Insecurity Fund that was just distributed. And what we're cautioning the Department of Ed to do is to ensure that SEAs and LEAs are being forthcoming and transparent about how those funds are being used to ensure that schools and districts who are furthest from opportunity and those that are most in need of those resources are the ones that get to leverage those funds. And so that's another aspect of policy that we're working on now. On the practice side, which is where I work with Future Ready Schools, which is an effort, a national effort to ensure that when schools and districts do transition to digital learning, that they're using thoughtful planning and strategic implementation of their efforts to ensure that students are taking advantage of that learning opportunity. And so since 2014, we've been doing that work nationally, building from a framework that touches on many of the components that were described by other panelists here today. With Future Ready Schools, our first response was to ensure that our leaders are encouraged that many district leaders and state leaders across the country have already done this. So like in North Carolina and other states, there have been plenty of significant strides to leverage remote learning in different ways and to also implement digital learning with some fidelity. And so we've launched a podcast series called Leading Through Unprecedented Times, where we had these conversations with the leaders about how they were able to implement digital learning and how they were able to overcome those hurdles that they had along the way. Another thing that we did with Future Ready was ensure that we're asking our networks, so not prescribing resources that folks don't need at this time, but asking them directly, what is it that you need? Do you need professional development for your teachers who are now transitioning to full-time remote access to their students? Do you need professional development for your principals and teachers on managing this new stage of remote learning or distance learning? And so we're using our ability to leverage such a large group of leaders to ask them what they need and then work with other organizations to support those needs. A little bit of background noise there. in my role as the research and engagement manager, what I get to do is to monitor and engage with districts who are in the middle of their planning process. And so we have an interactive planning dashboard where districts can go in and set up step by step what they need to do related to those areas of the framework in order to make an efficient transition to digital learning. And a lot of what has been said here is what I see in terms of districts who have been further along, really leveraging their strides with Wi-Fi access on buses and providing hotspots and things like that. But one of the things that it brings to my mind is that those solutions are in fact temporary. And now that we know, to Mark's point, that internet is a pervasive need and is no longer a luxury, we need to find ways to permanently bridge those homework and digital equity gaps so that students can continue their learning outside of school. And so we are seeing that districts are thinking more about how they can partner with other organizations outside of the school district, how they can leverage relationships with internet service providers, and even government and city government to find ways to engage students outside of school, as we know that more than 14 million students do not have access at home and do not have quality access, to Jeff's point, to internet at home. So they may be able to, for example, watch a video, but they couldn't watch a video and write an essay and do all the other components of their homework assignments at home. And so it's part of our responsibility as a national organization to make sure that we're looking at that challenge holistically and ensuring that we're pushing the powers that be to make decisions that affect the permanent change around the homework gap and around digital inequity. Another thing that I wanted to say related to my role as a researcher is I see that teachers are really stepping up. Teachers are going above and beyond their call to duty to really support students. And one of the things that's coming to light is the human part of education, right? So we're seeing how much we're connected. And this is to Vanessa's point. She talked about social emotional needs. We're seeing how much students and teachers are connected and what an important role the school plays in the community at large. And so I hope that's one of the things that moves forward after coronavirus leaves us and no longer pushes us to these extreme situations. We want to make sure that the good things that we're learning, and this is to Don's point, the good things that are coming out of this is that we're really stretching ourselves and we're really stepping past the boundaries that we may have created for ourselves to do things that we didn't think we could do. And one of those things is really leveraging the role of the school and the community and create those partnerships that can ensure that students are supported inside the four walls of their school and when they leave. And so that's one of the things I hope we push forward. And I also hope that we're able to think about how educators play a key role in the lives of students when they're in school and beyond that. So this is Teacher Appreciation Week, and every year in this week, I think about how many teachers have impacted my life and where I am now as a result of the support that they poured into me. And so if one of the things I hope we take forward is this great appreciation for the work that teachers and educators do nationally related to education and beyond that. I hope we continue the social emotional support for students. Thinking about other natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina, for example, research tells us that it took those students years to move past the trauma that they experienced as a result of that crisis. And so we should really take that into consideration after a coronavirus to make sure that within the school walls, we have those supports there for students who need them, and to look at all of the contextual differences that they bring to the classroom and ensure that we have supports there to carry them through that point. So I talked about 2 or 3 things, but I'll leave the rest of the conversation for question and answer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your perspective from the national level and all of the work that you're doing. I have a question from Danielle Bassel. This is directed at anyone who might want to answer, but maybe possibly Vanessa. Is the state building a best practices library of teacher lesson plans, activities from across the state and beyond? I know that we have a lot of resources, and sometimes when we have a lot of resources, it's overwhelming for teachers. So what are we doing to try to address that issue so that teachers aren't overwhelmed with all the resources, but can actually find a pathway through? Anybody want to address that?
I'll take that, Hiller. This is
Okay.
Vanessa. I want to say yes, that is conversations that we are having. We know that in the future, we have to be ready for content. We need strong content, K-12, that is streamlined and strategic for every teacher to access while they're in a traditional environment and to use when they're in non-traditional environments. So that is something that we are conversing. Just as I believe that we are going to see a permanent expansion in telemedicine for the healthcare industry, we're going to see lasting impacts from this experience. And since March 17th, we've learned that we are capable of delivering education differently in mass scale. So we have the opportunity for ongoing flexible models of education that are going to be designed to meet each family's need. We have to rethink time in education, and part of that rethinking is providing content that was just asked for, K-12, that's modular, that's adaptable, and takes some of the guess and stress out of teachers' hands so they have a tool that they can fall back on at all times. We've seen what educators can do when they have time. And so when we can equip those educators with strong content, we know we can make some gains. And this opportunity, when we have that, we can embrace and incorporate a competency-based learning model. You know, why not right now construct a system that meets children where they are, incorporates learner agency, and allows them to curriculum compact and get access to college credit and community college certification sooner. So we know that the tremendous urgency is going to be around closing that digital divide, giving standard resources to all teachers with best practices, and standardizing learning platforms with content. So I hope that answers that question, but that certainly is the vision of what we have to do to provide strong quality digital content that's modular and adaptive and closes learning gaps at the same time.
Okay, thank you. That does answer the question for us. We have another question that's directed at Jeff. This is from Angela Kuzak. Jeff, is there a way to see a breakdown of how many buses and which districts were chosen to receive the bus Wi-Fi? And can you tell us how the selection was made as to which districts were selected for the hotspots? I don't know if you have that data or not.
Yes, and in the press release that I just posted to the chat box, it should have the list of counties who have asked to participate so far. The way that we ranked the counties was using some different data points, and then what we did was from the different data, either it was DPI collected data, American Community Survey, FCC data, we ranked the counties based on the percentage of K through 12 households that fall into what we call the homework gap. So those K through 12 households that do not have internet access or sufficient internet access to complete homework assignments, or now, school assignments. I mean, this is more than just a homework gap; it's an education gap and an inequity. So that's how we rank the counties, and we've decided it's, again, we hope that through this process, and Avril mentioned some opportunities, and I think Dawn did too, that there are opportunities that are coming out of this tragic situation. And one of those is this renewed focus on not only remote learning, which is something that, the Friday Institute wrote the state's digital learning plan several years ago. It's been slow to implementation, but now we have a real case scenario on why and how we should do that. DPI and Vanessa's group and Vanessa's predecessor have been working on this for years. And so there's now an opportunity to highlight the issue and the inequities around the lack of broadband access to various households. So just a little soapbox there, but I want to make sure I fit that in, and I can get some additional data on those rankings in the spreadsheet if you'd like.
Okay, thank you very much. One other question I wanted to ask Jeff. We've heard about the efforts with low orbit satellites like that SpaceX is doing. What, if anything, or how is that going to benefit our state, or will it benefit?
Well, it could benefit the state greatly if the technology proves to be what it to do what it said it will do. You know, if, and Mark probably appreciates this as well as anyone, you know, the technology looks promising, but in the IT world, there's never a silver bullet. It doesn't seem to be a silver bullet. There's always, keep in mind, this is still a science experiment in space, no less. So if, you know, if it comes to fruition, as Elon Musk promises, it's going to be awesome. I mean, and there's another competitor too out there. I don't mean to just highlight that one company, because it will provide some additional bandwidth in rural areas. But keep in mind that that it is an emerging technology, and we've got to wait and roll it out. We have been working closely with SpaceX, as you all have, and Raise Ice has worked closely with them to identify areas in North Carolina where they could where they can establish their Earth stations. And so we have a great working relationship with them, and hopeful that it will be a technology that will benefit some of our more remote areas of the state. We still have a population density problem, which means that where there aren't enough people to sustain a business model, or in other words, or in the crass terms, make money for an internet service provider, we're going to have problems. Even this space technology, if they'll have a limited bandwidth, and if they will make more money in a populated area, that's where they'll point their satellites. So we just need to make sure that we continue to advocate for access in those remote areas, no matter what the technology is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. We have another question. Are we going to be using remote learning when school starts back in August? And what about reading programs for students in the summer and summer schools? Anybody have insights into that? About what's going to happen in the summer with summer reading programs?
I can't necessarily speak to North Carolina, but I know that this is something that districts across the country are grappling with, whether or not to extend the academic year beyond the traditional ending in May and then go on to summer school. I think one of the barriers to that districts are facing is funding. In addition to getting teachers on board with that idea to extend the school year. It's something that we're going back and forth about. One of the things that I think districts are trying to do is ensure that they provide content and resource support now in the middle of the school year to try and see what they can do to bridge that timeline to prevent against this learning loss that is expected as a result of Corona. So I'm not sure about North Carolina, but I think that that's definitely a problem that many districts are struggling with.
So I would add, like, there's so many things that are still unknown with a lot of this, but one of the things that we've seen, I think, a lot more of is districts saying to students who are one-to-one that they can keep their devices over the summer, right? And districts normally take them up at the end of the year, and now for the first time they're saying keep them over the summer. So that, while it doesn't necessarily, to Avril's point, it doesn't necessarily develop curriculum, it does provide some opportunities to use some websites and things like that to provide enrichment to students over the summer that they might not otherwise have had.
Okay, thank you. Lauren Kendall has a question. She's interested in learning more about efforts to support lower elementary students and their families. And I was wondering if Dawn has any insights for lower elementary.
Sure, I can speak to that. So while our students, we have been one-to-one in Hoke for some time, have been used to using devices in the classroom, it's certainly not done without adult support. And so we recognize that. And so what our teachers are doing is truly reaching out to families one-on-one and talking with them about how they help their child. It's not something we can just put it on an iPad, push it out to kids and expect it to be done. Really, they're promoting much more family interaction where maybe the learning is taking place in real world, application style. And I think the other piece is that they're being very, very aware of screen time for our younger students and cautioning parents against students just staying on devices and really giving them activities that they can do that are outside the device. But there are pieces and components where they pull them together on the internet, but a lot of that is being done outside of the actual device. And to Mark's point about the access being through the summer, we have already developed and talked with our our students and our parents about keeping our devices throughout the summer, and that our students and our younger students will still have access to some of those programs that they typically have access to throughout the school year.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just saw a note from Mark. Avril, I've been saying Avril instead of Avril. Short A.
Thank you.
Thank you for correcting me, Mark.
I get all kinds of different pronunciations.
Oh, well, I have a strange name too, so I get a lot too. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. We'll take one more question, then we'll start wrapping up. This is from Danielle Bassel again. Are there any innovative examples of using gaming to support learning, motivating kids, especially younger, to spend time using devices to learn? Obviously is a huge challenge. Does anybody have thoughts on that?
So I think a lot of things are on the table, right? So I think we're seeing a lot of things just with teaching online in general. One of the things that is fascinating about teaching online is everything has got to be much more intentional. You can't adapt on the fly the same way as you can in a classroom, right? So while there are examples of teachers who are using gaming, I think that's one of the values of online learning, is because we have to structure everything in advance so specifically in a way that we don't have to do in the classroom. It does allow us to create some of these longer term experiences like games that do, and especially with younger kids, that get them online and offline, right? So take a picture, get them out in the community, right? So use your laptop to take a picture of this and now post it, or show me an example of that. So we're seeing some especially with gaming, where students are engaging in more real world experiences, and then reflecting on it and readapting that, as taking those real world experiences and applying the content to those real world experiences. I think we're seeing that in ways that we haven't necessarily before. Now that students are home and we can be a little bit more flexible with time, we don't have to worry about a 90-minute block. It's a week to do your assignment. We're seeing some teachers leverage that in some very interesting and innovative ways.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Hillary,
go ahead, Jeff.
To relieve the parent guilt that many of us are feeling, could you just definitively, Mark, say that yes, gaming does help? Because I think that's all my boys are doing.
Sure. I mean, even so, there's a lot of educational gaming, but then there's also plenty of research and experience that games like Minecraft, especially Minecraft, and right, develop students' critical thinking, motor skills. Right, there are all kinds of advantages that we know to gaming for students.
I'm a better teacher than I thought then. If I could jump in here really quickly to the question about social media and accessing a lot more examples, I would encourage all the educators on this webinar and who are watching to join our network on Facebook, Future Ready Schools, and on Twitter at Future Ready. We've created quite a professional learning network through social media that's really encouraging. In addition, educators share examples all the time of lessons that they've done that are effective. And those different networks are broken out by strand. And so you have networks specifically for principals, specifically for instruction, specifically for tech leaders, for example. So please make sure that you follow us at Future Ready on Twitter and join into that conversation and get some more examples for yourselves as well.
Thank you so much. I wanted to acknowledge James Reed. James is on the call now, and he's working on his dissertation. And the topic of his dissertation is how our country is dealing with the challenge of teaching in COVID-19. So he thanks all of you for providing data for his dissertation. So we hope you do well with that, James. So our time is coming to an end. I want to thank you all who are participating on this call, and especially our panelists for sharing your time and knowledge. This is a difficult time we're in, but we're so encouraged by all of the response and positive energy that is being put into trying to figure out how to move forward with education. And I think if I had to think of one word right now that I have brings me hope is this issue of community, whether it's at the school level, the district level, the state level, or nationally. We see more and more community people coming together to address these issues. I am so encouraged by that. I've been in education for a long time, and it's really heartwarming to see how all of this is coming together. Now, that's not to say that we don't have a lot more work to do, because we do, and we all know that, but it's very exciting to see how folks are coming together. And I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of the medical teams and other frontline workers in North Carolina, in the US, as well as across the world, who are literally putting their lives on the line and risking every day to provide services for us. Your commitment inspires each of us every day. And as Avril mentioned, it is Teacher Appreciation Week, so we are so blessed to have amazing teachers, and they have really stepped up to try to figure out how to address all of the complex issues that we're confronting right now. So again, thank you to all of our teachers, not just in North Carolina, but around the world. Thank you all for joining us. Please give us some feedback on the session today. There's going to be a link, I think, in the chat box, or you may receive an email. Please give us some feedback so we'll know how to continue these types of dialogues within our state as well as across the nation. We hope you stay well, and we hope you have a great day. Thank you again.
Thank you.